The sun hung low over Florence, casting warm, amber light on the cobblestones of Via del Proconsolo. Aurora Valli walked with purpose, her heels clicking faintly as she passed the familiar facades of old bookstores and shuttered cafes. She wore a navy coat, worn at the elbows but cleanly tailored, an inheritance from her late mother, who had once said, "If you can't afford power, at least wear it." The words echoed in her as she stepped through the great iron gates of the old Biblioteca della Luce, a once grand archive of art and history, now mostly forgotten. Inside, the light dimmed. Dust hung in the air like a held breath. Shelves of abandoned manuscripts and mold-tinged canvases stood like quiet witnesses to time. Aurora adjusted her scarf and followed the instructions from the email. Second floor, West Wing. Look for a man who doesn't belong. He didn't. Julian Hart stood like he'd been painted into the space, out of place, and somehow more vivid than everything around him. Tall, sleek in a gray overcoat, his sharp features softened only by a half-smile that held too many secrets. His hair was slightly disheveled in a way that looked intentional, and his eyes, green, piercing, locked onto her like he knew her before she spoke. "Aurora Valli," he said, extending a gloved hand, "you're exactly as your portfolio suggested, methodical, bold, and a little romantic." Aurora hesitated, then shook his hand. "And you must be Julian Hart, the gallery owner with a reputation no one will explain." His smile grew, slightly amused. "That's the fun of mystery, isn't it?" They walked together through the long hall, passing fragments of forgotten art, half-peeled frescoes, broken sculptures, books sealed shut with mildew. Julian's voice was smooth, practiced. He spoke of New York, of his private gallery nestled between Soho and Greenwich, and of the upcoming exhibit, one he claimed would disturb, awaken, and provoke. "I want a curator who doesn't just categorize," he said. "I want someone who can resurrect, someone who can look at a destroyed canvas and hear what it once tried to scream." Aurora's heart stirred, both professionally and personally. She had worked for years beneath men who saw her as a tool, never a voice. Julian's words lit something dangerous in her: belief. As they reached a sealed room, its door rusted but still locked, Julian stopped. He pulled a slim gold key from his coat. "What's behind this door," he said, "hasn't been touched in 50 years. I want you to decide which pieces deserve to see light again." He handed her the key. Aurora held it, the metal cold against her palm. The moment felt too symbolic to be casual. "Why me?" He looked at her and for a second dropped the charming mask. "Because I read your paper on forgotten female painters of the Renaissance, and I saw something in it that most curators lack. Rage," Erling, caught off guard. "Rage? Repressed rage," he said. "The kind that turns into art." They didn't unlock the room that day. Instead, they sat by the arched window of the library as twilight fell over Florence, drinking bitter espresso from a cracked cup Julian found in the staff kitchen. He told stories, half true, she suspected, about stealing his first painting at age 14, about running away from Connecticut boarding schools, about almost dying in Marrakesh. She listened, part entranced, part cautious. He made her feel seen. And that was its own kind of danger. When she finally rose to leave, he walked her to the door. The sky was deepening, blue turning violet. Before she stepped into the street, Julian leaned close, his breath warm against the cool of her cheek. "You don't have to say yes tonight," he murmured. "But if you do, I promise, your life won't be small anymore." Aurora walked away with her pulse uneven, the gold key still clenched in her fist. She didn't know yet that this moment would mark the beginning of something that would destroy what she believed about love, art, and herself. But as the wind picked up and scattered old leaves across the street, she allowed herself a single thought. What if I deserve to be seen too? And with that, the gallery of shadows had already begun to open. New York was nothing like Florence. It moved too fast, talked too loud, and never seemed to sleep. Aurora stood at the window of her new apartment, a sleek, impersonal loft that Julian insisted on renting for her, watching the blur of yellow taxis and red tail lights below. The city didn't feel like home yet. It felt like something waiting to happen. Julian had sent a car to pick her up from JFK, and she hadn't seen him in the 2 days since. Instead, Clara Monroe had shown up the morning after her arrival. Tall, elegant, and effortlessly stylish in a vintage blazer, Clara introduced herself with a soft smile and a bouquet of pale lilies. "I'm Julian's friend," she said, placing the flowers in a vase without asking, "and the unofficial gatekeeper of his life. I help him not ruin everything." Aurora smiled politely, unsure how to respond. Clara eyed the apartment. "He's pulling out all the stops, isn't he? This place is bigger than mine." Her tone was warm, but there was something cool beneath it. "So, what exactly are you to him, Aurora? Curator, muse, girlfriend, project?" Aurora blinked. "I was hired to design the exhibit, that's all." Clara tilted her head. Of course." That night, Julian finally appeared. He swept into the loft without warning, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a sketchbook filled with mock-ups for the gallery layout. He kissed Aurora's cheek like they'd been together for years, and praised the way she'd arranged her books on the shelf, as if order was a kind of intimacy. They drank late into the evening, the 3 of them. The conversation sparkled with wit and half-true stories. But under the laughter, something else was there. When Clara mentioned Julian's exes, his smile tightened. When Aurora complimented Clara's necklace, Julian changed the subject. When Clara teased Julian about his control issues, Aurora felt the air shift. Later, when Clara left with a kiss on Aurora's cheek and a whispered, "Call me if you ever feel off," Aurora wasn't sure what she meant, but the thought stayed with her. In the days that followed, Aurora threw herself into work. Julian's private gallery, Heart and Mercy, was a converted church in the West Village. Gothic arches, black floors, cold light. It was beautiful in a severe, haunted way. Aurora began selecting pieces from Julian's private collection, rearranging walls, drafting lighting cues. It was exhilarating and exhausting. Julian was unpredictable. Some mornings, he brought her coffee and kissed her shoulder before she'd even gotten out of bed. Other times, he vanished without explanation. When she asked where he'd been, he'd smile and say, "You're not mine to answer to." But if she didn't reply to a text within minutes, he'd call, again and again, until she picked up. He criticized the way she dressed for opening meetings. "You don't need to look like a student anymore," he'd say, pulling the collar of her shirt flat. "You represent us now." When she laughed too long with the gallery's young lighting designer, Julian fired the man the next day. He was sloppy, Julian said, and too friendly. At first, Aurora told herself this was just passion. Julian was intense, that's all. He cared too much, loved too fiercely. But late at night, as she lay alone in the loft, Julian gone again, unreachable, she replayed the conversations in her mind. Once, she asked him about the woman in a photograph on his office wall. A dark-haired beauty in a red dress, eyes full of challenge. Julian froze. "She's not part of this," he said, then took the photo down the next morning and never spoke of it again. Another time, when Aurora mentioned going back to Florence for her brother's photography exhibit, Julian smiled too calmly. "Of course, but we're building something here. Maybe let Luca have his spotlight without you this time." She didn't go. She began waking with a feeling of heaviness in her chest. Her art, once alive and spontaneous, now felt like strategy. Even her journal, once full of dreams and wild sketches, now recorded only questions. Why does he alternate between loving and punishing? Why do I feel lonelier around him than I did before he came into my life? Why do I still want him? One evening, they had dinner in the gallery after hours. Julian opened a bottle of rare French wine. The space was dark, lit only by candles and the soft glow from a single piece Aurora had just finished installing, a fractured mirror sculpture titled Self Without Center. He raised his glass. "To art that exposes, not decorates." She hesitated. "To truth." He stared at her for a beat too long. "Are you keeping secrets, Aurora?" She tried to laugh, but it stuck in her throat. "Aren't we all?" Julian leaned forward. "Just remember, I brought you here because I believed in your eyes. but eyes lie too if you let them. When he kissed her that night, she felt a strange chill, not from the air, but from the knowledge that something inside him had shifted. And maybe, just maybe, something inside her had started to disappear. By morning, the wine glasses were still on the table, untouched. Aurora stopped recognizing herself in reflections. In the mirror above the gallery bathroom sink, she saw a woman who wore darker clothes, heavier makeup, and smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Her curls, once wild and sun-touched, were now pulled into tight knots. Her voice, once full of opinion, had turned soft and selective. It wasn't deliberate, it was survival. Julian had become her world, and then he'd begun to shrink that world down to a single room, a single schedule, a single set of rules only he seemed to understand. "You need to focus," he told her after she missed a lunch with Clara. "You're not here for distractions. You're building your legacy." "But I miss her," Aurora said, trying to reach for the old connection, the shared laughter over espresso and Clara's dry observations. Julian looked at her with something close to pity. "Clara's threatened by you. She doesn't want you to succeed here." That same night, he told her she was brilliant. He held her face in his hands and said she made the art breathe, that no one had ever seen beauty the way she did. Then, when she asked for an evening off to call her brother Luca, Julian stared at her like she'd just admitted betrayal. "Why now?" he asked. "You haven't called him in weeks." "He didn't call you either, did he?" Aurora hesitated. I miss home." Julian leaned back, eyes narrowing. "There's nothing there for you anymore. You're here now, with me." She never made the call. Days turned into weeks. Aurora stopped going out alone. Her phone was always in Julian's reach. Her email, he'd offered to clean up the spam and help manage the inbox, but she noticed whole conversations missing. Luca, friends from Florence, even a reply from a prestigious gallery in Madrid, they had all quietly disappeared. She started having trouble sleeping. Not because of nightmares, but because of the eerie silence that settled after Julian fell asleep beside her. So close, yet unreachable. He had a way of curling his arm around her waist, firm and possessive even in sleep, as if afraid she'd vanish. The loft no longer felt like a home. It felt like a stage set, clean, curated, lifeless. Aurora began keeping a notebook under the bed, scribbling down her thoughts when Julian was gone. The entries were short, fragmented. "Today, I wanted to leave. He said I looked tired, but he won't let me rest. I'm forgetting the sound of my own voice when no one is watching." The turning point came on a cold Thursday night. Julian had left early for a private meeting with an investor, telling her to stay in and sketch something raw. Aurora nodded, but as soon as the door clicked shut, she felt a spark of urgency, a need to breathe, to remember who she had been. She pulled out an old suitcase from the closet, planning to find her passport, just to see it, just to touch a piece of freedom. It wasn't there. She searched everywhere, drawers, coats, sketchbook sleeves, nothing. Then, driven by a strange instinct, she lifted the mattress. Under the frame, tucked between the springs and the wooden slats, was a small zipped pouch. Inside, wrapped in a gallery invoice, was her passport. She stared at it for a long time. It wasn't expired. It wasn't damaged. It was simply hidden, without her knowledge, without her consent. Her hands shook as she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her name on the worn cover. It felt like staring at someone else's identity. Julian came home just past midnight, drunk on praise from the investor, humming softly as he poured himself another glass of wine. He kissed her cheek, his hands warm and firm against her neck. "You look tense," he murmured. "You need to trust me more." Aurora didn't respond. She just nodded. But inside her, something had cracked. And once a crack forms in glass, it never truly disappears. From that night on, she began planning quietly, watching him, listening more closely, paying attention to the contradictions, the gaslight flickers in his words. The mirror between them was no longer a place of reflection. It was a wall, thin, dangerous, and beginning to shatter. And Aurora Valli, the woman who had once wandered dusty archives in Florence with dreams in her eyes, was starting to remember who she used to be, before Julian Hart told her who she should become. The room shimmered with wealth and attention. Julian's gallery had never looked so polished. Every light was perfectly angled, every sculpture placed with obsessive care. The walls gleamed, freshly painted in bone white, and classical music drifted faintly above the soft hum of conversation. Art collectors, critics, and press roamed the exhibit like royalty through a cathedral. Champagne glasses clinked gently, laughter curved at the edges of each smile, but Aurora felt none of it. Her dress, chosen by Julian, tailored in silver silk, clung to her in ways she hadn't approved. Her heels pinched, her lungs tightened. She stood near the installation she'd curated for weeks, a piece titled Inheritance of Silence, layered with paintings from erased women in art history. It was the only thing in the room that still felt like hers. Then the lights dimmed. Julian's voice rose from the end of the hallway. Cameras turned, faces turned, the music stopped, and Julian walked toward her slowly, holding a black velvet box in his hand. "Aurora Valli," he said, loud enough to echo. "You came to New York and gave this gallery a soul. You've made me believe in beauty again, and I can't imagine building anything, art, life, or legacy, without you." He dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. Some clapped softly. Phones went up. Aurora froze. In her mind, she screamed. Not out of hatred, but fear. There was no way out of this moment without setting off an explosion she wasn't prepared for. Julian stared up at her, smiling, eyes sharp and fixed like a predator, daring his prey to move. She nodded. Yes. The applause was instant. People surrounded them, snapping photos, offering congratulations. Julian stood, kissed her lips briefly, and whispered against her skin, "Good girl." Clara found her 10 minutes later in the restroom, standing alone in front of the mirror, wiping lipstick from her mouth. "Congratulations," Clara said dryly, closing the door behind them. Aurora didn't look up. "I didn't know he'd do that." "Of course you didn't." Clara leaned against the sink. "That's how men like him work. Surprise is control wrapped in silk." Aurora met her gaze in the mirror. "You think I made a mistake?" Clara exhaled. "Julian doesn't love women, Aurora. He loves the idea of them. He loves how they make him feel, but the second you step outside that idea, he'll punish you for it." Aurora said nothing. But when she returned to the loft that night, she took out a worn leather journal Luca had gifted her years ago and opened it for the first time since moving to New York. She wrote, "I didn't say yes because I wanted to. I said yes because the world was watching, and I was afraid of what he'd become if I said no." Julian was kind the next few days, overbearingly so. He ordered her favorite food, flooded her studio with fresh peonies, sent texts every hour. "Are you happy? Do you feel safe? Do you love me yet, truly?" He introduced her as his fiancée in every meeting, each time with a proud smile, each time gripping her hand a little too tightly. Whenever she made a suggestion for the exhibit, he praised it in public but adjusted it in private. When she disagreed with a collector's comment, Julian said gently, "Let me do the talking. You're emotional. They'll use that against you." Her world continued to shrink. She no longer answered Clara's messages. Julian had begun checking her phone again. Her private sketches were torn one morning, accidentally, Julian claimed after he spilled coffee, and her passport, still hidden under the mattress, remained untouched. She began journaling every night, quietly, fearfully. It was the only place where her thoughts still belonged to her. She wrote, "He says he loves me more every day, but I think he loves having me more than being with me. Sometimes he kisses me in front of others like I'm a prize, not a person. I want to run. I'm just not sure where I'd go anymore." The gallery's next phase of the exhibit was due in 2 weeks. Julian insisted she create something original to mark her engagement. Something raw, he said, something that proved her transformation. She began a piece in secret. A canvas layered in broken glass and black thread, titled "The Cage You Don't See Until It's Locked." She painted it late at night, covering it with a drop cloth before Julian came home. But one morning, he noticed the paint under her fingernails and said, "I hope you're not hiding things from me. We're partners now. Secrets are the poison of love." Aurora smiled. Of course not. She kissed him on the cheek and returned to the studio, heart pounding, hands shaking. Outside, New York moved on, cold, crowded, indifferent. But inside the loft, Aurora Valley was drawing a silent line, a line that no one could see yet. But she knew. When the time came, she would cross it, and nothing would ever be the same again. It began with a call she wasn't supposed to answer. Aurora had slipped out of bed before sunrise while Julian slept, one arm flung over her pillow like a claim. His breathing was steady, his body warm, but she felt like a ghost beside him. She stepped into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the floor in her robe, heart racing. Her old phone, one she'd hidden in the back of her sketch drawer and only powered on at dawn, buzzed softly. One message. "I need to talk to you. Now. It's serious about Julian." Her hands shook as she typed back. "I'm listening." Seconds later, the call came through. She answered in a whisper. "Where are you?" Luca asked, his voice tight. "New York." I know. But listen to me carefully, Aurora. I'm in Florence. I went to the library. I dug through court records. I didn't want to believe it, but..." He stopped, his breath catching. "He's dangerous." She froze. "What do you mean?" "There's a woman. Her name was Celeste Marini. She was engaged to Julian 6 years ago. She disappeared, no trace. Her family filed a missing persons report, but it was buried. 2 lawsuits, both sealed. Emotional abuse, harassment. The gallery in Madrid blacklisted him. He paid someone to make it go away. And then I found medical records from Connecticut. He was institutionalized once. It's all wiped now, erased from public access. But the fragments are still there if you look hard enough." Aurora stared at the pale tiles of the bathroom floor, her fingers going numb. "You have to leave," Luca continued. "He's not what he says he is. He builds illusions. He feeds off control. You have to get out." She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her eyes filled with silent tears. "I'm flying to New York," Luca said. "I'll be there in 3 days. Just hold on." She hung up without another word, then sat frozen for nearly an hour, trying to breathe through the weight crushing her chest. Julian was awake by the time she stepped out. He was shirtless, coffee already made, his phone on the counter. He looked up and smiled too brightly. "You're glowing this morning. Dream of me?" Aurora forced a smile. "Maybe." He kissed her forehead, then picked up her phone casually. "Mind if I check something? My charger's dead." She stepped forward quickly. "It's low on battery. Let me get you mine." His eyes flicked up, just a second too long, just enough to tell her he didn't believe her. From that moment on, he began tracking everything. He added software to her devices for safety, claiming they'd had a recent break-in at the gallery. Her emails were rerouted through his assistant. Her calendar now included appointments she didn't remember making, mostly dinners with investors, appearances with collectors, walks with donors, and always he was there. She wasn't alone anymore. Not even in her own head. Her secret canvas, the cage you don't see until it's locked, disappeared from her private room. When she asked about it, Julian shrugged. "I thought it was too bleak. You're better than that now. You're evolving." He replaced it with a soft pastel painting of her from behind, a figure draped in lavender, faceless, blurred at the edges. "You're too hard on yourself," he said. "Let me show them your softness." One night, she tested the boundaries. She told him she wanted to walk alone in Central Park, just for air. Julian hesitated, then smiled. "Of course," he said, "but take Clara, for company." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an instruction. Clara came, reluctantly. They walked in silence for a while until Aurora turned to her with quiet urgency. "I know about Celeste." Clara stopped, her face drained of color. "I know about the lawsuits, the missing records, all of it," Aurora whispered. "My brother found everything." Clara looked away, her voice brittle. "I wanted to warn you, Aurora, but every time I tried, he finds a way to twist things, make it about loyalty, about betrayal. I've known him since we were kids. I used to think I could fix him, but you're in deeper than I ever was. Then help me get out, Aurora said, her voice trembling, before he breaks me too. Clara nodded slowly. I will, but you have to be careful. If he even suspects what you're planning, he won't let you go. When Aurora returned home that night, Julian was waiting with dinner on the table, candles lit. He poured her wine, stroked her hand, told her how proud he was of her work. But his smile never reached his eyes. And as they sat in the quiet, surrounded by his curated perfection, Aurora knew something with terrifying clarity. She was living inside a painting Julian had designed. And if she wanted out, she'd have to tear the canvas herself, before it set her completely on fire. The night of the launch arrived like a storm that refused to announce itself. The gallery was polished to perfection, its Gothic bones draped in elegant light and expensive perfume. Journalists, collectors, critics, and sponsors gathered like a congregation, eager to praise Julian Hart's vision, ready to witness Aurora Valley's evolution, as he called it. Aurora stood in a black silk dress, her hair swept into a low knot, her lips red like war paint. Julian's hand never left her back. He smiled at everyone, whispered clever introductions into her ear, and reminded her again, softly but firmly, tonight is about unity, our future. Don't forget who made this all possible. But Aurora had already remembered everything. At the center of the exhibit was supposed to be Julian's crown jewel, a painting titled Obedience in Bloom, a soft, melancholic piece of a faceless woman dissolving into flowers. But last night, after he fell asleep, Aurora returned to the gallery and made a change. She removed his prized work and replaced it with her own, The Lover's Cage. It was brutal, honest, and nothing like the other pieces. Oil and ash on raw canvas. A female figure twisted in glass and rope, her body bound in golden frames, her face painted over and over again, each version more erased than the last. Around the edges, faded lines from her journal, scratched in blood-red paint. You said you loved me, but you only loved the silence I gave you. The moment the cloth came off and the painting was revealed, the room went quiet. Too quiet. Gasps followed, a few stunned murmurs, then a ripple of fascination. One critic whispered, "This isn't Hart's voice. This is something else. This is real." Julian stood beside her, motionless, his expression unreadable. He turned to the crowd with the smoothness of a well-rehearsed actor and offered a practiced smile. "My fiancé has a gift for surprise. Isn't it stunning?" he said, his voice warm but tight. Clara appeared beside Aurora and whispered under her breath, "What did you do?" Aurora answered without turning, "I showed them the truth." The rest of the evening passed in a surreal blur. People surrounded her. They praised her courage, her rawness. They called it a feminist scream, a revolt in oil, an unfiltered wound. Julian nodded, smiled, posed for pictures with her. But she could feel it, his fury hiding behind that calm exterior, trembling just under the surface. He didn't speak a word in the car on the way home. Inside the loft, the silence followed them like fog. Julian set his keys on the table, slowly, precisely, then turned to face her. "You humiliated me," he said, voice low and even. "I told my truth," she replied, standing her ground. He stepped closer. "You replaced my work without telling me. Because you wouldn't have let me," she said, "and because it's mine. My voice, my pain, my body." His face twisted for a second before he caught himself. "You think this makes you brave? You think a single painting gives you power? You wouldn't have this platform without me. I gave you everything." "No," she said softly. "You took everything, Julian, and then made me thank you for it." Something snapped. He grabbed the vase from the table and hurled it against the wall. The sound shattered through the room. Aurora didn't flinch. She just stood there, staring at him like she was finally seeing him without a filter. His chest rose and fell in sharp movements. "You think this little rebellion makes you free? You're mine, Aurora. You said yes. You wear my ring." She pulled the ring off and placed it gently on the table. "Not anymore." He laughed, dry and bitter. "Where will you go? Everyone knows you as my fiancé. This gallery, your reputation, it's tied to me." She walked past him without another word and went into the bedroom, locked the door, slid the old suitcase out from under the bed, the same one she'd packed 3 days ago. Her passport was already in her coat pocket. She sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding, tears hot in her eyes, but not falling. She had shown the world her cage. Now it was time to break it, and even if she had to burn everything she built to the ground, she knew one thing for sure. Julian Hart had painted over too many women, and she would not be one of them. Rain fell in streaks across the windshield as Aurora stood outside Clara's building in Soho, the suitcase in her hand growing heavier with each minute. Her arm throbbed where Julian had gripped it too hard before she slipped out of the loft. She hadn't looked in the mirror before leaving. She didn't want to see what her face would say. Clara answered the door in a robe, her eyes widening the moment she saw her. Aurora stood motionless, soaked to the skin, mascara smeared, trembling. Without a word, Clara stepped aside. The door closed behind them with a soft, decisive click. Aurora dropped her suitcase, her voice cracked. He grabbed me when I tried to leave, said I owed him, that I was nothing before him. Clara led her gently to the couch, wrapped her in a blanket, and sat close. You're here now. That's all that matters. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The loft was dim and quiet, filled with the comforting scent of cedar and books. Outside, the storm raged louder. Clara poured hot tea and came back with a first aid kit. Aurora winced as Clara dabbed her bruised arm with a wet cloth. You're not the first, Clara said finally, her voice low and trembling. He hurt me too. Years ago. It wasn't physical, but it was worse in some ways. He made me question myself, erase myself. I thought I could manage him. I thought I was strong enough. Aurora looked at her, startled. Why didn't you ever say anything? Clara shrugged, bitterness hidden behind her poise. Because by the time I realized what he was, I was already too ashamed of who I'd become around him. They sat in silence again. Aurora reached into her coat and pulled out a flash drive. This has everything. The erased lawsuit documents, psychiatric records, emails he thought I deleted. Lucas sent them. If anything happens to me, this needs to be seen. Clara took it, her expression tightening with understanding. He built a life on manipulation. If this goes public, it won't just ruin him, it'll erase his empire. Aurora nodded. He ruined too many lives in private. He shouldn't get to walk free in public. Clara leaned forward, her voice now resolute. Then let's do this right. You'll disappear. I'll cover for you here, keep him distracted. Luca's already looking into legal support back in Florence. We'll make this loud but safe. Aurora's eyes glistened, but her voice didn't shake anymore. I'm done being afraid. They set the plan in motion quickly. Clara booked a one-way flight under a false name using an old contact she trusted. Aurora would leave New York before sunrise, land in a quiet Italian village 2 hours outside Florence, where Luca had secured a rental house in privacy. At 3:15 a.m., with the city still asleep and rain tapering to a quiet mist, Clara walked Aurora to the edge of the block. She handed her a phone with a single contact programmed. Luca, stay gone until it's safe. And if he shows up again, don't let him talk. Don't let him near your mind. Aurora hugged her tightly, whispering, Thank you for not turning away. Clara swallowed hard. I never should have in the first place. Then Aurora turned and walked into the shadows of the street, pulling her coat tighter. Each step away from Julian felt like a return to herself. When she boarded the plane, she kept her hood low, her sketchbook pressed against her chest. She didn't look back once. By the time Julian woke up that morning, his gallery was empty, his fiancée gone, and the walls that once reflected his control were starting to crack. And somewhere over the Atlantic, Aurora finally slept without fear for the first time in months. The wedding had been planned to perfection, or rather, engineered. Held in a minimalist estate overlooking the Hudson River, with a view carefully chosen by Julian himself, the ceremony was meant to be intimate, tasteful, and public enough to secure attention from art and fashion media. Aurora wore the gown he selected, silk, champagne-colored, designed by someone she'd never met. Her name was printed in magazines before she could decide if she still recognized it. And then the morning after, she was gone. The staff found the bridal suite untouched, the bed unslept in. Her dress was left draped over a chair, her wedding ring sitting in the middle of the vanity like a whisper. There was no note, no message, just silence. Julian's panic turned to rage within hours. By lunchtime, he was calling her a mentally unstable woman to the press, planting stories about breakdowns and erratic behavior. He stood in front of reporters looking heartbroken, his voice trembling as he said, "All I've ever done is love her." But behind closed doors, his mask cracked. He filed a defamation lawsuit against Clara the next day, accusing her of interfering with the sanctity of marriage and of stealing intellectual property from the gallery. His legal team leaked photos of Clara with Aurora, twisting their friendship into whispers of manipulation and obsession. Meanwhile, Luca received anonymous threats, his social media hacked, his studio vandalized. Someone spray-painted the words "Traitor's Blood" on his front door. Julian was spiraling, not because he'd lost Aurora, but because he couldn't control her anymore. But Aurora was already far away. She had stepped off a small bus just outside the village of San Cassiano in Tuscany, wearing oversized sunglasses and a name that wasn't hers. Luca's friend, a widowed winemaker named Alessandra, had offered her shelter and silence. The vineyard stretched for acres, wrapped in rows of olive trees and the smell of fresh earth. The sun hit differently here, gentler, slower, as if time agreed to be kinder. Aurora kept her head down. She worked in the vines during the day, pruning, harvesting, learning how to move with the seasons. Her hands grew calloused. Her back ached. And slowly, she began to feel alive again. In the evenings, she sat in the cottage kitchen with Alessandra, drinking tea by the fire. They spoke in soft Italian, and Aurora sometimes forgot the sound of Julian's voice for a few minutes at a time. She didn't paint at first. It was too raw. But one morning, after weeks of avoiding it, she took a scrap of wood from the vineyard barn and began to draw, not with elegance, but with fury. She used charcoal, crushed berries, wine sediment. The image that emerged was violent and blurred, but it was hers. The figure on the wood had no face, just a gaping mouth full of flowers. When Luca finally visited, he brought news. Julian was unraveling. His gallery had lost major investors. The Lover's Cage had been leaked to an underground exhibition site, along with the flash drive. People were beginning to talk. Questions were being asked. The press was shifting. "You lit the match?" Luca told her, and the fire's finally spreading. Aurora didn't smile. Not yet. She was still healing, still flinching when a door closed too loudly, still waking up at 4 a.m., wondering if she'd made it out completely. But that night, as she sat under the stars with dirt beneath her nails and a sketchbook on her lap, she whispered to herself, "I'm not afraid of him anymore." And for the first time, it felt true. The news came on a cold morning, slipped inside an envelope from Luca, as if spoken too loud it might shatter the peace she had fought to rebuild. Julian Hart was dead, overdose. Found alone in his penthouse loft in New York, surrounded by scattered papers, broken canvases, and empty prescription bottles. Aurora read the words over and over, waiting for something inside her to respond. Relief, closure, even triumph. But there was only a strange, weightless ache in her ribs, like a bruise left behind after the pain is gone. She folded the letter, placed it inside a drawer, and didn't speak of it for 3 days. The world reacted quickly. The art community mourned with performative grief. Articles were published. The tragic genius of Julian Hart, beauty, madness, and loss. His past was painted over with soft shades of sadness, his cruelty repackaged as misunderstood passion. No mention of Aurora, no mention of Celeste, no mention of the lawsuit documents or psychiatric records that had surfaced briefly before his death, then conveniently disappeared. But rumors whispered louder than headlines. Julian's final phone logs had been leaked. Dozens of late-night calls to numbers no longer in service. and one voicemail, barely coherent, left to his own answering machine just days before his death. I hear her. She's still here, in the walls, in the paint. She's laughing and I can't turn it off. Some said it was guilt, others said madness. A few claimed it was a curse. Aurora said nothing, but she booked a one-way ticket to Florence. She returned in silence, wrapped in a scarf and a borrowed name, walking through the narrow streets of her old city as if retracing the bones of a former life. The city hadn't changed, but she had. Her steps felt heavier, her breath steadier. She passed the abandoned art library where she'd first met Julian. The windows were dusted over, the front gate chained shut. She didn't stop. Instead, she went home. The apartment she had grown up in sat just above a flower shop, where the scent of lavender and crushed basil drifted through the walls. Her old room was smaller than she remembered, but the light still poured in through the same cracked window pane. She unpacked slowly. Her sketchbooks, the journal, the flash drive, still wrapped in cloth, and the painting. The lover's cage, now rolled and fragile from its journey, sat propped against the corner. She unrolled it one morning and stared at it in the golden light, wondering how she had once created something so violent, so honest, without breaking. Julian was gone, but the echoes weren't. She still heard his voice sometimes, not with pain, but with detachment. Words he had said over and over until she believed them. "You're nothing without me. I made you. This is love." But now she looked around the room where she first learned to draw. Walls covered in fading postcards, old tapestries, and fingerprints of the girl she used to be. And she knew the truth. Julian hadn't made her. He had tried to steal her. And what he couldn't control, he destroyed. She spent the next few weeks walking the hills outside the city, sketching again, quietly. Faces of women with open mouths, eyes full of fire. No cages, no frames, just freedom. She didn't attend Julian's memorial in New York, but she sent a letter to Clara, a single line handwritten at the bottom of a blank postcard. "The silence he left behind is finally mine." And in Florence, with a cup of strong coffee and charcoal on her fingertips, Aurora Valli began again, not as a survivor, but as a woman who returned from the edge, carrying only what was worth keeping. The night was quiet, but the air buzzed. Florence hadn't seen this many people lined outside a gallery in years. Some came because they remembered her name. Others came because they remembered his. But most came because of the whispers about a woman who disappeared, reemerged, and painted her way out of something so dark it left smoke on the canvas. Inside the space, Aurora moved quietly, her fingers trailing the edge of the white wall as if grounding herself. The gallery was small, nothing like Julian's Grand Cathedral in New York. It smelled of pine wood and plaster. The lighting was warm, human, honest. Each painting in Toxic Love stood alone. No artist statements, no elaborate descriptions, just a title, a canvas, and a truth. The first piece, Apology on Repeat. A portrait of a man with no mouth, only eyes, wide and pleading, while flowers grew from his ears. Another, She slept with one eye open. A bed painted in wax, surrounded by wolves in suits. Each figure had her face, variations of her, before, during, after. Then came the bleeding heart, stitched. A raw, textured image of an open chest, needle and thread piercing through red tissue, with tiny hands reaching from inside to pull it shut. People stood for long minutes in front of it. No one spoke. The centerpiece was placed at the far end, the locked door in a field of mirrors. A lonely door, sealed, nailed, reinforced, standing alone in an endless field of mirrors. But the mirrors didn't reflect the door. They reflected nothing. Blank glass, emptiness. Each one silently asking, "What do you see when he's not telling you who you are?" As the crowd thickened, Aurora stood to the side, dressed in a simple black dress and flat shoes, her hair loose. She didn't need height anymore. She didn't need armor. She had the walls to speak for her. People approached her with hushed awe. They asked about inspiration, about Julian, about her disappearance. She answered with kindness, but not detail. Then a young woman, barely 20, stood before her and asked, "Is this revenge?" Aurora looked past her toward the stitched heart, then toward the locked door. "No," she said softly, her voice steady. "It's survival. On canvas. Survival they can't edit or explain away." Luca arrived late. Clara came too, from New York, unannounced, her eyes shining with quiet pride. They didn't speak much. Just stood with her, shoulders touching, three survivors of a truth too ugly to beautify. As the night deepened, Aurora stepped out onto the small balcony above the street. The city below shimmered with lights and soft chatter. She closed her eyes and breathed in the air. Not to forget, but to remember on her own terms. Julian Hart had left scars. He had written pages in her life she never asked for. But now, she had painted over them, not to erase, but to reclaim. She walked back inside, surrounded by strangers who finally saw her not as his fiancée or his muse, but as herself. Aurora Valley, artist, survivor, the woman who turned pain into truth, silence into sound, and toxic love into something that could never again hurt her. Only be seen.